If you would like to earn CPE credit for listening to this show, visit earmarkcpe.com, download the app, take a short quiz, and get your CPE certificate. Now on to the show.
From data rails, this is FP&A Today.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to FP&A Today. I am your host, Paul Barnhurst, aka the FP&A Guy, and you are listening to FP&A Today. FP&A Today is brought to you by DataRails, financial planning and analysis platform for Excel users. Every week, we welcome a leader from the world of financial planning and analysis and discuss some of the biggest stories and challenges in the world of FP&A. We will provide you with actionable advice about financial planning and analysis. This is going to be your go-to resource for everything FP&A. I am thrilled to welcome today's guest on the show, Asif Masani. Asif, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you. So just let me give a little bit of a background about Asif, and then I'll give him an opportunity to tell a little bit more about himself. He comes to us from Mumbai. He's an author. He recently published a book about FP&A. We'll have him talk about that later. He's a chartered accountant. His day job is a manager at Coursera. He also has a part-time LinkedIn creator, author, trainer, many other things. And he's had various different FP&A roles over his career. So Asif, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Sure, Paul. First of all, thank you so much for again having me. And I was waiting for you to have me on the show, I think, for the last couple of months, and finally we made it happen. So thank you so much.
And we're excited to have you. I'm really glad we get to have you on the show.
Amazing. So I started my career not in FP&A. So like most finance folks do, I started in audit. I spent about 3 years as an intern working with EY in audit, and I really enjoyed it for the first couple of years while I was learning a lot, working with different clients, learning about different industries. But as and when time passed, when I completed 3 years, 3.5 years, I realized that I should try something new. So that's the time when I wanted to switch, and I didn't know about FP&A at that time, and I wanted to go into either valuation or investment banking. So I did a certification on financial modeling and started applying for jobs in valuation and investment banking, but I could not get into it. And by coincidence, I got an interview with Citibank, which was an FP&A profile. I'd never heard about FP&A before doing that interview, and I made it through that interview, and I then started there as an analyst. Worked there for about 5 years. 2019, I left Citi as a FP&A manager. Took a break for about a year and a half to do a couple of other ventures I wanted to work on, and then again came back into FP&A. I think around 2020 after COVID. Worked with one pharmaceutical company called Pfizer, and right now I'm working with an edtech company which is Coursera. I lead the FP&A function for India and APAC at Coursera.
Okay, great. Thanks for a little bit about your background. And I agree with you. It's pretty typical for someone to start in accounting or auditing, sometimes investment banking or consulting, but most people don't start their career right out of college in FP&A. Some do, but I agree, a more common path is often that accounting background. So, next question I have here for you. You have over 50,000 followers on LinkedIn. I know you recently hit that number. Congratulations. You also run your own YouTube channel. I think you have over 5,000 subscribers there, as well as you have a website, FP&A Professionals. Can you maybe talk a little bit about how you got started in creating content? How'd that come about?
I was doing, so I was in between jobs around in 2021. And I was finding it difficult to get my next role. So that's the time I thought I should maybe build my personal brand on LinkedIn, start writing about FP&A on LinkedIn, so that people, when they search me on Google or they search me on LinkedIn, they can know, okay, this person knows what he's going to talk about, like what is going to, if he's applying for a role, he's good at FP&A. So that was the primary reason I wanted to have a good personal brand, visibility among employers. So that was the reason I started writing in 2021, I think year and a half back. But as I uh, as I did that more, it developed more as a hobby and a passion. And I think by end of 2021, I knew that okay, I wanted to make this a more bigger part of my life. So that's how I got started on LinkedIn. And once this happened, I think it was about 1 year back, December 2021. Somebody reached out to me on LinkedIn asking me to do a webinar for CA students who are just newly qualified and they wanted to know about FP&A. And I did that webinar. That person who recorded the webinar, he uploaded on YouTube. That YouTube video didn't do a like it didn't do a lot. It didn't get a lot of traction initially in the first 2-3 months. It was less than 100 views, but somewhere around the 3 months mark after it was uploaded, it suddenly got like 3,000, 4,000 views, and then people started reaching out to me on YouTube as well, like on commenting on that video. So that's the time I started creating more content on YouTube. It was very difficult to create both content for LinkedIn and YouTube along with my day job. So what I figured out, the best way would be to uh, get content from other experts. So I started then interviewing. I started my own All About FP&A series. I think 8 months back, with Carl as being the first guest, Carl Seidman. And then I've continued that doing once a month. So I don't do a lot of content on YouTube these days, especially in the last 8 months. But I do a lot of interviews just like this one. So that makes it a little bit easier. So I don't have to create content. I just have to curate, I have to just plan an episode, and other people are actually helping me create that content.
Makes a lot of sense. You know what it is like. 13 different spreadsheets emailed out to 23 different budget holders. Multiple iterations, version control, errors, back and forth updates. You never really feel in control of the consolidation and collection process. Yep, I've been there. Stop, breathe. DataRels is the financial planning and analysis platform for Excel users. DataRels takes data from all your company's disparate sources. No organization is too complex, consolidating everything into one place, secured in the cloud. Now all your data finally talking to each other. Everything is automated back into your report in Excel. Cash flow, FX conversion, intercompany transactions, now automated and up to date. Drill down and variance analysis in seconds. Don't replace Excel, embrace Excel. Turn your Excel into a lean, mean FP&A machine. Find out more at www.datarels.com. What advice would you offer to someone who wants to create content? Say they wanted to get started creating content.
I would maybe tell them a couple of things. So first one would be to identify your audience and pick up one topic or one subject which you can go deep in. So that will help you focus on one area. So that is definitely one. And second would be do it consistently. Don't stop after 2 months or 3 months. Do it consistently for at least 6 months, and you are creating good content. You'll definitely see the results.
Thanks. No, that's very good advice, similar to what I give. Be consistent, find your voice, know what you want to talk about. I recommend generally niche down and find your area, right? Like you said, your focus. So those are all good pieces of advice. And I kind of laughed when you mentioned, you got started. It was great helping build your brand, find a job. I mean, when I got on LinkedIn, that's really where it came from, was find a job, and kind of built over time. And somewhere along the line, I found I liked it and kept building. So I think we have similar stories there. Also similar with FP&A. I didn't know what it is when I took an FP&A role. I don't think most people do coming out of college. It's becoming a little more popular, and I know you're doing a lot to help people kind of learn that FP&A is a good career path. And I think this is a perfect transition to your book that you recently published called All About FP&A. Can you talk a little bit, a couple things. One, what is the book I know it's about FP&A, but kind of what's the focus? Is it for people starting their career, senior people? Kind of what's the focus of the book? And what was the impetus for writing a book?
The reason for writing the book was exactly the point that we discussed. So a lot of people, at least in my country, which is India, they don't even know about FP&A. Just like I didn't know 7 years, 8 years back about FP&A. So a lot of people even don't know that FP&A exists as a career. So there are job
Mm-hmm.
descriptions which say finance manager, maybe a finance specialist or something like that. But there's no it's still very new, at least in where I am, where I belong. So a lot of people, if I ask, say, 10 people who graduated in finance, maybe 7 people out of 10 may not even know what FP&A is. So that was
Mm-hmm.
one of the biggest reasons for me writing the book. So at least people know what FP&A is, and they have another option that they can aim for. Maybe not immediately, but maybe at some point in their career. So that was one of the reasons. Second reason was also always wanted to write a book. This was there for the last, I think, 5 years. And once I had some content on LinkedIn, I figured out this might be the book I can write. So I already have like 100 pages of content. If I can focus on this, and I can maybe make it a book which is 200 pages to 20 pages.
Great. Makes a lot of sense that you'd already done all that content. You'd always wanted to write a book. So why not write one about FP&A? Can you talk a little bit about first how it's been received? How have sales gone? How have people asked about it? Just kind of what's been the general feedback since you launched it? I mean, I know I've heard some good things, but maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
So it's a very niche topic. So it's not
Hmm.
going to sell like thousands or 10 thousands of copies.
Sure.
Uh, but because I think because of the people that are connected to me on LinkedIn, people who receive my content, people who've been receiving and reading my content for over the last 1.5 year, especially it was received very well by them. I remember I when we did a pre-launch in October, in the first day itself, I think sold about, I think in the first week we sold about 100 copies. So
Great.
people were waiting for it to release. Uh, and since then, after that, I have been it's been selling like 5 to 6 copies a day. So it must have crossed 300, 400 right now.
No, those are good numbers. And right now it's currently only available in India. Is that right? Or is it available anywhere?
So the physical version, the hardcover version, or the paperback version, I should call it, it's available only in India. The Kindle version was just launched about 3 weeks back, so that should be available in most countries where you have Amazon access.
Got it. Okay, great. So the Kindle version is available basically everywhere that you have Kindle and Amazon. So I'm curious, what was the hardest part about writing the book?
I think the hardest part would be to develop that habit of writing every day. So even though I had some content with me, it still had to be refined. It still had to be outlined and put together in a way that it comes together as a book. So for even after having some bit of content, I had to write about for maybe 30 minutes a day for around 2.5 3 months between, I think, April to June, that period. So I think the hardest part was the first 10 to 15 days where I had to force myself. I had to block my calendar for an hour every day, and I had to force myself to write 400 or 500 words. I think that was the hardest part, the first 10 15 days. Once I got over the first 15 days, it became a lot easier. And the second hardest part was the proofreading, because so once the book got ready, I sent it to the editor. The editor came back with correcting all the grammatical mistakes, correcting all the making the sentences look better. So once it came back, it was the budgeting period. So it was around that August and September mid time, and the book was the edited version was with me, I think, first week of September, and I could not find time to read it. I could not find time to proofread it until I think end of September, first week of October, because of the workload at office, and it was the budgeting season at that time. So finding time to proofread it, and I had to do the proofreading at least 3 times just to make sure that everything is okay. So reading, doing that proofreading 3 times was very challenging, just because it was very hectic at work as well at that time.
Yeah, I know how difficult budget season could be, so I can imagine how hard it was to try to balance budget season and writing a book at the same time. Not an easy task by any means. So I admire you for sticking with it, because that's a lot of work. So congratulations on that. And as you mentioned, anyone who's interested in the book, check it out. The Kindle version's available. Go to Amazon, just look it up, All About FP&A, and you can find it there. So, next question on the book. What would you say is the kind of key takeaway you hope people get from the book? If there is one thing you hope, the readers take away from it, what would that be?
So let me talk about the audience first. So the audience for the book is people who are just starting out in FP&A, or people who are in finance and don't know about FP&A. So it's for people to learn the initial concepts about FP&A. So that's the book tagline as well. It's called Getting Started with Your FP&A Journey. So the book is targeted towards them. Also, people who are slightly experienced, maybe 1 or 2 years, but they need to comprehend it better. So just in case they want to appear for an interview, although they know a little bit about FP&A, but they cannot comprehend it, or they cannot articulate it in an interview. So I think a lot of people also buy the book for that reason. So it's for beginners in FP&A. One or two key messages uh, the book shares is on data and budgeting. So it covers the budgeting process. So one of the key chapters in the book is on the budget, on creating a budget. So the key focus is how to create a budget from scratch for different areas, right from revenues to all the expenses.
Great. I mean, I think it's definitely a book that's needed in the marketplace, no question. I mean, I get asked from a lot of people how to make that transition into FP&A. You think of college students, most of them don't know what FP&A is. I have a friend here locally that teaches, he created a course for MBA students, a master's course to introduce them to FP&A. And he teaches it for the MBA program here at the local university. And I think it's great because very few universities have those type of courses. I think a lot of people come out. I mean, almost everybody knows, okay, there's corporate finance, there's treasury, there's accounting, there's audit, there's investment banking. But like you said, most people don't even know there's FP&A coming out of college. If you ask 10 people that just finished their chartered accountant, hey, do you want to do FP&A? Most of them would be like, what is FP&A?
Yeah.
Right. So I think you definitely hit on a very important subject that, people need. So speaking about FP&A, why are you so passionate about FP&A? What do you love about it, and what keeps you working in FP&A?
I strongly believe in finance. FP&A is one of the most happening profiles. So if you are somebody with a personality trait that doesn't want to follow the rules, like if you don't want to do the same stuff in terms of the accounting cycle, or be it following the checkbox approach of auditing, or maybe being abreast with the taxation laws which keeps changing. So if you're not if you are working in finance, and if you're not interested in some of those traditional roles that I just talked about, I think FP&A is a great option, and it was for me as well. It allowed me to use my skills which I already had from accounting and audit, and also it allowed me to be a little more creative, which was not possible in those roles. So that's the reason I like FP&A.
I love your point about the creative. And I like to joke. I heard this on a podcast, I think once, and it said, and if an accountant gets creative, this is the difference between FP&A and accountant. If an accountant gets creative, they go to jail. If an FP&A professional gets creative, they get promoted.
Yeah.
And obviously not true, tongue in cheek, but it's that whole idea, right? FP&A is very creative. It's very forward looking, lots of assumptions, where accounting is backwards looking, very structured, very procedural, as is auditing, as is tax. Yes, there's some creativity, sure, but it's very different, right? That FP&A, there's a lot of understanding business and partnering and things that I enjoy, that if you really enjoy those type of things in the business and the commercial, it's a great place to be, right? For
Yep.
some people, it's not right. If accounting and the structure and the procedure and that, you really like tying everything out, then it's a great place. It works for you. FP&A is not for everybody for sure.
Yeah.
But
And
I'm like you. I really enjoy FP&A.
yeah, and I have friends in auditing who are still in auditing,
Mhm.
and they enjoy what they do, and I completely respect that. So they are actually very passionate about be it audit or taxation,
Yep.
and that's completely fine. It depends on what you want to do in life.
100% agree. I have a friend, an accountant I worked with, and I was trying to hire an FP&A analyst, and I asked him if he's interested. He's like, no, I already did that. That's way too subjective and political. He's like, I
Yeah.
prefer accounting. I know what the numbers need to be. I know the answers. Don't want to deal with basically making up numbers, was his way of putting it. That's what it felt like to him for FP&A. I'm like, all right, well, then you're in the right spot. You stay where you're at, and I'll stay over here in FP&A because you're a great partner. I love working with you. It was kind of funny. So, exactly like you said, find your passion and stay there. So let's talk a little bit about your day job now. We've talked quite a bit about the content creation, your book. Maybe talk to us a little bit about the FP&A structure at Coursera, a little bit about, how it's structured and what your role is there.
Sure, I'd love to cover that. So Coursera is a growing company. So it started about 11 years back. So it just celebrated its 10th anniversary last year. So it's not a startup, like not a very new organization, but also it's not very established. Like it's not been there for decades. So
Sure.
it's a little bit in between. So you do have a good FP&A team set up there, which has been there for about
Mm-hmm.
three and a half years, and also because it's still relatively new in the whole scheme of things. 3 years is not a long time. If you consider a business or consider an organization. So how it is set up is we have three business units.
Mm-hmm.
One is the B2C, which is the online platform where people can go and purchase courses and certificates. So they can do the course and certificates for free, but if they need to download the certificate, they need to pay. So that is the first business. The second business is enterprise side, where we sell enterprise licenses to big companies, which they can use to
Sure.
train their employees. And the third is online degrees, which is tying up with premier institutes along the globe, the top most institutes in every different region, and bringing degrees to students to different parts of the world. So those are the three business units. So it's exactly set up that way. We have a small team working on each of these three business segments,
Sure.
and then there is a regional team. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so there's a team for each of the regions, and I am a part of that regional team. So there's one person looking at India and APAC, that's me. There's another person looking at the EMEA region, and there's a regional team of 4 to 5 people.
Yep.
So there's a detailed the regional teams, and then there is a corporate team which consolidates everything.
Yep.
So it's about a 22 people team, about 10 people in business teams, like business aligned teams, about 3 to 4 people in regional teams, about 3 to 4 people in corporate team, and then there are a couple of folks who are specialized in the budgeting tool, like they are the admin for the tool that we use.
That all resonates with me, very much similar to American Express. I remember, especially when I was in business travel, I supported the APAC, Asia Pacific region, and Latin America. We had someone for EMEA, someone for the US. You had your corporate, and then you also had some local. Sometimes they're helping support the business. A lot of similar things. We had the tools people, just on a bigger scale, obviously being American
Yes.
Express, right?
Yes.
But so that structure is pretty common. So, how in your role, how do you support the business? Outside of budgeting and forecasting, what are maybe some of the things you're responsible for? I know it varies by company. Like, is it mostly investment? Do you do a little bit of the sales commission type stuff? What are the kind of key responsibilities you have?
The budgeting, forecasting, and reporting are the things that we do anyways, which is a part of your BAU or your monthly calendar. Apart from that, we in Coursera have OKR driven culture. So OKR is objective and key results. So
Yeah, in fact, actually speaking to that real quick, if I can find it, this was the book first written about OKRs.
Yep.
Measure What Matters. If you haven't read it, just tell the audience. I really recommend it. Good book.
It's Bernard Marr, the author.
No, this one's John Doerr.
John Doe. Okay.
He started. It's Andy Grove who started at Intel. So it's really kind of the history of where it started. There's others who have written books about it too, and how they used it, and also how Google talks about how Google, the Gates Foundation, and some others have used it.
Yeah, so what I know, I joined this organization about a year and a half back, but from what I know, it has been inspired from Google's OKR methodology. So we've adopted a lot of.
So Andy is the guy who taught it to Google. He used it at Intel, Andy Grove, and he was one of the early investors at Google, and he helped them implement it there.
Understood. Okay. Yeah. So maybe this book is one of the key underlying philosophies that we also follow.
Yep.
So it's the OKR philosophy. So every individual or every team has an OKR. So apart from what you're doing every day, every month, there are like a couple of special projects that you are expected to drive, which might be inside your FP&A team, or it may also be outside. It may be a cross-functional project where you are working with different business teams to help them achieve a business objective. So usually there are like 2 or 3 key results or objectives that you need to set every quarter, and then you have to also report after the during the quarter how you're doing on them, after the quarter how did you do and what you learned. So that is one, and also we then report about this as well in what we call as the quarterly business review. So once a quarter is done, we do report whatever was whatever were the highlights of the previous quarter, what were the low lights as in what didn't go wrong, what didn't go right, or what were the mistakes and how can we learn from those mistakes. There's a detailed business review that happens at the quarter end, and then you also plan for the next quarter. So based on the forecasting that you do, you also lay out a plan that what you already you have a plan which was done last year, but you again set the same OKRs for the next quarter. It will not be the same as plan which was done maybe 6 months back. It might be very different. So again, you set your objectives and key results for the next quarter, and that again the same process begins for the next quarter.
And how have you liked OKRs? How have you found those work for you? Is that a method you enjoy? Kind of what's your thoughts on using OKRs?
I actually love using it, and I especially believe if an organization grows fast, it is one of the good ways to keep everybody aligned to the strategy, to whatever the vision that the CEO and the senior leadership has. So setting that in the OKR, and that drills down to different business units, different functions. I think it's a very good way to keep everyone aligned on the company's mission and company's whatever the objectives are.
I agree with you. We used it at one of my prior companies, and I thought it was a good method, and it can work really well when you have buy-in from senior leadership and everybody's focused on key results that all roll up to really help drive the strategy, right? It can help with alignment, and it can really help you to know how to focus your time. Because okay, I need to get this key result. I need to, demonstrate that I've done that. And so it can help you focus. I think it's a great tool. Do you have some favorite metrics you like to look at when you're supporting a business? I know it's going to vary some, obviously business to business, but are there some key maybe financial or operational metrics that you always like to look at? Maybe kind of your go-to?
I especially like working with the marketing metrics. So my favorite metrics are all related to marketing, just because I am also personally interested in marketing, and we do a lot of this on LinkedIn as well. So metrics like lifetime value of a consumer, or the cost to acquire a customer, or cost per click, all those type of metrics which are used in online advertising. So I love tracking those.
Yeah, those are all really valuable metrics. So important today with, so much of business being, content driven, trying to fill that top of funnel and understanding how are my dollars providing a return? Are they, is it worth my time? And that's always the challenge. We have a great episode we're releasing here probably in about 3 weeks where we had the VP of marketing from DataRels and Christian Wittig from DataRels. And they talked about how marketing and FP&A work together. And we discussed a lot of those metrics. So that episode will actually come out before this one. So if anyone's listening, when I say it'll be a few weeks, it will have already happened by the time this episode's released. But it was just a few weeks ago we had that conversation. So next question I have here is just kind of shifting a little bit. Can you talk about how established maybe FP&A is in India? And then a little bit, what's it like to be a practitioner in India? And then maybe your thoughts of how that compares to the US or other parts of the world.
I can say in India it's been still evolving. So although it has been around since maybe 8-10 years now, uh, but as I mentioned earlier, a lot of people still don't know what FP&A is, and that's very very common. So in India, not a lot of profiles mention the job description as FP&A. If they are not big companies, if they are mid-sized companies, they would often advertise the job description as finance manager, uh, accounting and finance controller, something like that, which will have some components of FP&A,
Mm-hmm.
but it will not be there in the headline. So people do not relate FP&A as a separate job description, just like I don't know if that's true in the US, which is different in bigger companies where they do have FP&A job designations, like FP&A analyst moves to FP&A senior analyst, and then assistant manager, manager, senior manager, and goes to director, VP. So larger organizations follow this, but most of the organizations which are mid-size, they don't call FP&A as FP&A, although they might be doing like 80% of the job of FP&A and finance business partnering. How about US?
Yep, I'll talk a little bit of my experience. So my experience with India and FP&A, I'll talk to that, has mostly been where companies I worked for have outsourced it. So
Hmm.
a lot of the work I've seen in FP&A from India is often very procedural. It's
Yeah.
very much, hey, preparing the reports,
Hmm.
doing the standard stuff that you can productionalize, so to speak. And
Yeah.
then a lot of the business partnering is managed in the US by, generally more experienced FP&A professionals, where a lot of times the stuff we're moving to India, for cost arbitrage, labor arbitrage, is that stuff that is very standardized, very early in the career type of work that you can train someone that's just out of college a year or two to do versus that more experienced day-to-day business partnering part of FP&A. So that's kind of my experience of how I've worked, because I've managed a few people in FP&A in India at American Express and at Solera. So I've worked, quite a bit with FP&A in India for US companies. So my experience, I'm sure, is a little different. But when you talk about just kind of FP&A in the US, the FP&A job role is very common. It isn't, startups, you don't see it, right? We all know
Mhm.
that. Startups generally have fractional CFO. It's not till they hit a certain point. Typically if they're venture backed, it's usually say Series C,
Mhm.
Series B, Series C, that
Right.
they really start adding that FP&A. Uh,
Mhm.
Usually that first hire is a finance person that will
Mhm.
do some FP&A, or a founder will do some of the budgeting, but they're also doing controlling. And, you have to at a certain point till you really add that team. I think most companies wait a little longer than they should. I had a someone on the podcast that talked about that quite a bit, Casey Wu, who talked about just the importance of, look, hire FP&A as early as you can, because it's really now being seen more and more, especially in the US, as a strategic function. And generally, FP&A and business partnering are the same role. Where you go into Europe, they're often separated in other places. You could still have a corporate FP&A and kind of a commercial or a business FP&A. I've spent most of my career supporting the business. I've only had one role where I was really in a corporate role. All my other roles have been out in the business units, and I like that. I'm not a big fan of wanting to roll everything up and deal with all the decks and, kind of like, as I say, herding cats between all the different business units. I really like getting into the strategy with the business and partnering with them and figuring out, how we achieve our objectives. So that's a little bit of how I've seen it in the US. And Mike, I think it's probably more established, more common. It sounds like in India, it's still often done kind of under controllership for a lot of companies till you get into the really big companies, or you're supporting companies that aren't based in India. Is that probably a fair kind of assessment?
Right. Yeah. And on the outsourcing, it's a big industry. So especially banking and IT companies. I know most banks, you mentioned American Express. So even I used to work with Citibank. I started in a very similar role. So I started in what they call it a center of excellence. So they do what they do is centralize all their functions in one location, and it's not just in India. They have 2 or 3 locations. So I know in Citi we had India, which is Mumbai, and then we also had Costa Rica. And they were like 2-3 locations. So you used to get the benefit of both a lower cost. So you could have a lower cost base, centralize everything, so you can automate a lot of stuff, and also get that time zone advantage. So if it's a very large, big organization, they want to be working 24 hours, and the only way they can do it is like have people working on different sides of the world.
All makes sense. And I've seen all of that, right? I know Citi, all the banks, the IT, like you mentioned, almost all of them have center of excellence in India that are doing various functions, whether that be accounting, APAR, FP&A, a lot of finance functions they centralize there in India. Like you mentioned, getting the 24/7 hour support. There's often some cost benefit as well. And, it's a great way to kind of build that team, and great way to start a career, because you get to work in a center of excellence with a large company and see how a lot of things should be done. So, shifting gears here a little bit, we just ring in the new year. Can't believe we're first week of the new year. So what do you see as maybe the biggest trend coming into 2023 for FP&A?
What I can see is what's happened in 2022, that will continue to happen. So what you've seen as a trend in 2022, especially around use of technology, and you know it better than most about tools and technology. So I think use of technology, use of a lot of automation, AI and machine learning driven processes, so that people can get more accurate forecast, more streamlined data, real time data. So I think all those things happened in 2021, 2022, and those things will continue to accelerate. So that is one. And the second would be on the collaboration and the strategic planning side. So once all of these things are automated, FP&A will have more time, and they already have more time uh, to become that strategic partner, or like participate more on contributing to the business. The special projects I mentioned at Coursera, those are all part of these strategic planning and adding more value to the business.
So if I heard it, I would summarize it as 2 things, like you said. One, continuing to leverage technology to automate and streamline processes.
Right.
Technology is an enabler. It continues to get better. And the second thing that does is it frees us up to focus on the value creation activities, the strategy, the partnering. And we're going to continue to see that trend continue as we continue to automate and free up time. We'll see FP&A playing more and more of a strategic role. Is that a
Yeah,
Fair statement?
I think you summed it up very well.
All right, perfect. Just want to make sure I understood you there. I thought I got it. So, all right, now we're going to get into some personal questions. We're coming up near the end of our time and just have a few more questions for you. This is one we like to ask people. Can you talk about the accomplishment you are most proud of from your career? So if I had you in a job interview and I asked you that question, what would be your answer?
So this might be very counterintuitive. So this experience is actually not from my previous job. So this was a break that I took after the Citi bank role in 2019 to pursue a different role. So I thought maybe let me try. At that time, we had a new taxation system in India. So there was an implementation of a new taxation regime, which is called goods and service tax, which was very new. So I got interested reading about it around 2018, 2019. And 2019, I thought, okay, let me try something outside of FP&A. Maybe I should try the new tax system that's coming up in India. So I read a lot of books about GST and I set up a practice in GST in 2019 and after leaving the job at Citi. And it did well. I think I hired a bunch of people. It went very well for a year. But then there were two things. One, I was not very happy doing that role. I was not like I was again getting that same feeling of what I got after working in audit for a couple of years. So I realized that taxation may not be the best thing I should do. I should be doing with my career, and I realized that maybe I should come back to FP&A. So I think that is something where that experience is something that has taught me a lot of things. First of all, like building your own team, marketing yourself. So when you are selling your even when you're selling a taxation service to a client, you have to be very good at pitching, marketing. So things I learned there, I think that those are all things that are going to help. So I think that experience has been one of the best accomplishment, although it didn't last long. And once COVID hit, I had to actually decide to come back to FP&A because I was working in the hospitality industry, and once COVID hit, all my cash flow stopped just because all my clients were were all hotels and restaurants. So that's the point I decided to come back. But that experience was really good in terms of shaping me as a better professional overall.
That's a great experience. I appreciate you sharing that. And I totally could understand COVID hits. Yeah, hospitality. I'd worked in the travel and entertainment industry with American Express. So I understand that. When I joined at the end of 2008, as you know, all the banks had cut all their travel budgets. We'd just gone through a huge recession, and I can understand. I was fortunate to get in at the time, but it was a real challenge for us. You know, not obviously being a bank as well. We had the bank side and we had the travel side. So yeah, it was a difficult time for our business. And sometimes you just have to pivot. You know, there are things you can't control that happen, but the learning, I agree with you, you know, starting my own business, learning how to sell, learning how to market, figuring out, you know, how to productionalize things. There's a lot of value that you get beyond just what you get from a traditional FP&A role.
And that practice is still ongoing. So my dad retired early and he took over that, and he's still running that practice. So it's still alive. All those people that I hired, most of them are still working with my dad.
Well, that's great. Well, congratulations on that. It's quite an accomplishment, you know, to be able to keep that going. I know your dad's running it, but still, you know, kudos to you for starting that business and now, you know, doing it again in more of an area that you have a passion. That's great. So, you know, last couple questions here. We're going to ask a personal question. This is one we ask everybody on the show. What is something unique about you, something we can't find online that you can share with our audience?
Something I don't share a lot is my core values. So I usually work or decide upon working on a project or on a job which are based on these core values. So one of them is learning and growth. So if I see that I will get an opportunity to learn and grow, I definitely would pick up that job or any project that I'm working on. And that may be one of the reason I'm working with an education company like Coursera. Uh, Other thing is I love sharing my knowledge. So whatever I learn, I don't feel good if I don't share it. So if I keep it to myself, I feel that I'm not doing a good service to others. So sharing and teaching is another passion that I have. So I think those two things really sum up my whatever I decide to do in future. It will be around those values and those things that I like.
Your unique thing is really your core values drive everything you're doing, which is great. I love that. And your core values is one, you want to make sure you're learning.
Yeah.
If you're not going to learn from the project, does it really make
Mm-hmm.
sense? And two, you want to make sure you're sharing what you've learned. So you want to be able to help others as well as also make sure you're learning and growing. Is that?
Yeah. And when I do that, I realize when I started doing that, I don't share this a lot, but I share this with people who I work closely with. And then I realize, okay, I attract a lot of people who are having similar mindset and similar objective, and that's
Mhm.
the time when you connect and you get good partners to work on with projects. So I think having this as a core value and like being super focused on it, it has helped me a lot in terms of identifying good projects, also identifying good people to work with.
Yeah, I hear you. Good people to work with is so important. And thank you for sharing that. Now you've just shared it with a thousand,
Yep.
maybe 2,000 people. So
Mhm.
now everybody's going to know about your core values. I appreciate you, sharing that. And I think those are great that you have those. So this next question is probably one of my favorite because I love to see the diversity in answers. What's your favorite Excel formula, feature, function? What's your favorite thing in Excel?
I think you will hate me for this, but I have stopped using Excel. I have stopped using Excel for about a year and a half. So Coursera uses Google Sheets, and I have like transitioned from Excel to Google Sheets in the last
Boo! No, I'm
one and a half
kidding. I'm
years.
kidding.
And I hated it when I initially did that. I think in a year and a half back, I in fact even thought about quitting my job just because you're not using Excel. So that was the first 3 months of using Google Sheets. But I think from what I remember, when I used to use Excel last frequently, which was about a year and a half back, I was very like I was very fortunate, and I was very happy with the X lookup formula. I never had to go back to the V lookup or index match, although match is a slightly better function when you do modeling. But if I had to pick one, I would pick the X lookup because I think it made my life a lot easier, especially if I recollect when I used to do Excel maybe a year and a half back.
Yeah, I was a big fan of XLOOKUP. I liked it. And, Google Sheets is a great spreadsheet, right?
Yep.
I mean, it's a good
Mhm.
program. You can do a lot of things in as well in it. I mean, obviously Excel is the dominant tool out there and DataRails is a big fan of it because their
Yep.
platform's built on it.
Mhm.
But I think we can both admit, Google Sheets has a lot of good functionality. I used it recently to build my kind of first model in Google Sheet. I had to do it for a client that didn't use Excel. And
Yeah.
at first I was like, I don't want to do this. I hate this. But you get used to it and you find it has its benefits. I mean, every tool
Yep.
does.
Yes, it does.
So I get that. And I'm glad you said XLOOKUP because I'm a big XLOOKUP fan.
Yeah, and I do miss Excel a lot sometimes when I have to do a really complex models and heavy models, which sometimes hang up in Google Sheets. So I do miss Excel sometimes.
Yeah, it can handle more data. I mean, it's been around 40 years, right? I mean, it's the dominant spreadsheet in the world.
Mhm.
There's no disputing that. It's the king still. So what
Mhm.
advice would you offer to someone starting their career today in FP&A? I mean, beyond reading your
Mhm.
book,
Mhm.
I'm putting a plug in for your book there.
Thank you for
what,
that. So,
what would you say?
mhm. uh, yeah. So right now I see a lot of people coming up and influencing a lot of young people. And we are a part of it as well. So what I've seen from my interaction with a lot of young folks, especially those who are starting out in finance, they believe that if they don't get into FP&A in their first role, that's a failure for them, and which is typically not right. So my message to people who are just starting out is, if you cannot get into an FP&A role, it's all right. Get into any finance role, get into accounting, get into auditing, get into any role which will give you some skills that you can later on use to transfer in an FP&A profile if you like, if that's the place that you want to be.
Great advice. And I'll add something to that. I don't have an accounting background. I started my career writing contracts for the government, went to grad school, got an MBA in finance, did an internship more in IT. I was also doing a dual degree in information management. And then I got a role that it was called financial analyst, but it was really working in the business for nearly a year and a half. And I did some cash flow forecasting with it and then transferred over to FP&A. So no, it doesn't need to be your first role. You don't have to be an accountant. There's a lot of paths to FP&A. You need to understand accounting. I think you and I can agree on that, but you don't have to have that background. So I think people need to realize today in the corporate world, your paths are going to take a lot of twists and turns. Yes. Rarely is it this nice straight ladder that you just climb. That's kind of a myth almost today. So last question here. If people want to follow you, what would be the best way to follow you? How could they learn more about you?
So best way would be LinkedIn. You can just search my name on LinkedIn and it'll come up. Or the second best way would be to go to my website, which is fpnaprofessionals.com. There you can find out all my content. You can also find out courses on FP&A, which I think are good ones. So if you want to check them out, you can go there as well.
Great. Thanks for that, Asif. And thanks for being on the show. Again, congratulations on your book. If you haven't read it, go look out, to Kindle and download it. It's give me the title again. It's slipping my mind.
It's all about FP&A.
Yeah, all about FP&A. I almost said, what about FP&A? I'm like, no, that's not right. All about FP&A. So again, thank you for being on the show and appreciate you carving some time out for us, Asif. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I loved this conversation and thank you for having me.